The year is 1845. Let's blow the dust off the pages of history and try to understand the spirit of that era. Just as humanity boasts of artificial intelligence or space tourism today, back then it boasted of the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines had brought worlds closer. Factories were humming with activity, and science was making brand new discoveries every day. The British Empire, the empire on which the sun never sets, strutted around as if it owned the world. The world map had not yet been fully defined, but on that map there was a white void that bothered the British, a void that stood defiantly, wounding their pride, those dangerous, icy waters at the top of Canada, the Northwest Passage. What was the importance of this passage? Because back then, the Panama Canal wasn't even a dream. For a ship to go from Europe to Asia, it had to sail around the southernmost tip of South America, around that dangerous cape. This meant a journey that took months and cost a fortune. The British Admiralty, the brains of the Navy, had become obsessed with this idea. If we find a way through the north, through the ice, we will be the kings of trade, and we will be the ones to complete the map. With this ambition, the largest, most expensive expedition in history, one that was said on paper to never fail, was prepared. But fate always has a bitter answer for hubris. The Unwanted Captain and the Spaceships. You know what the most tragicomic part is? Sir John Franklin, who was put in charge of this massive expedition, wasn't actually anyone's first choice. In fact, he wasn't even the second or third, he was the fifth choice. The Admiralty offered it to others first. One said, "I can't deal with that cold anymore, I'm too old." Another wouldn't go against his wife's word. So who accepted this crazy offer? 59-year-old Sir John Franklin, known by the nickname the man who ate his boots, because on a previous expedition he lost half his men and was forced to eat moss and the leather of his own boots to avoid starvation. Franklin couldn't be called a bad man. On the contrary, he was fatherly, had good relations with his men, was religious and kind. But he was also a man who possessed great ambition and sometimes rushed things. This expedition was his final show before retirement. 2 ships were placed under Franklin's command, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Even the names of these ships, one meaning darkness, the other terror, seemed to foretell the end they would experience. But these were no ordinary ships. They were like the spaceships of that era. Since they were actually warships, bomb vessels, they had very sturdy hulls, but their hulls were also plated with extra iron so they could break the ice. That wasn't all. Inside, steam heating systems, which were hard to find even in London homes at the time, were installed. Inside the ships, 25 horsepower steam engines and propellers stripped from train locomotives were installed so they could cut through the ice even if there was no wind. They took a library of 12,000 books, theatre costumes, a barrel organ, music box, a monkey named Jacko, gifted by Lady Franklin, and a Newfoundland dog named Neptune. In short, the men were going on a luxurious vacation, not to their deaths. The invisible killer, 16,000 tin cans. As the ship set off with 129 men, everything seemed to be going well. As they left England, everyone waved, letters were written, "We will make history," they said. But disaster had already coiled like a snake in the ship's pantry before they even left the port. The expedition's biggest innovation was taking canned food with them. A whopping 16,000 cans of food. "We will never go hungry. We have enough food to not starve for 3 years," they said. But the tender process was done in a rush. The company that won the bid with the lowest price made a terrible mistake while trying to meet the deadline. They used lead solder to seal the can lids. The workmanship was so poor that the lead melted and dripped into the food. Not only that, the pipes of that wonderful device that obtained fresh water from seawater were also made of lead. So, from day one, every meal these poor men ate, every drop of water they drank, began to slowly poison them. Lead poisoning is an insidious thing, my friend. First your gums turn black, then fatigue sets in, but the worst result is that it affects your brain. Paranoia, loss of decision-making ability, hallucinations. So, while they needed to think clearly in that icy hell, they were actually all slowly starting to lose their sanity. The ice trap and the wrong-turn whalers spotted them for the last time off the coast of Greenland in July 1845. Once the ships entered the fog, no one ever heard from them again. So what happened? When Franklin reached King William Island, which wasn't fully known on the map at the time, he had to make a decision that would change everything. He would either go around the east or the west. He chose the west. Today we know that place was a trap. It was a place where winds and currents compressed the ice into a single narrow passage, a place with the most ice fields in the world. In September 1846, the trap snapped shut. The ships were suddenly stuck in the middle of the ice. The crew was calm at first. Winter will pass, summer will come, the ice will melt, and we will continue on our way, they said. The summer of 1847 came, but that year the weather in the Arctic was so cold that it didn't allow the ice to melt. The ships couldn't move in any way. The nightmare begins. As they entered the second winter, everything began to get worse. Scurvy was added to the lead poisoning. Due to vitamin C deficiency, people's gums were receding, their teeth were falling out, old healed wounds were reopening. Think of the environment, a cold of -40 degrees, pitch black night at the pole, and inside, groaning, delirious men, spitting blood. In June 1847, their leader Sir John Franklin died. Leadership passed to his deputy, Francis Crozier. Crozier had good experience, but there was nothing he could do. With the arrival of 1848, supplies were running out. Moreover, most of those magnificent cans had turned out to be spoiled. Crozier made the hardest decision in history to abandon the ships. The Death March. In April 1848, the remaining 105 men got off the ships. Their plan was this: to walk to the back river, hundreds of kilometers south, and find help from there. But the things they took with them are proof that they were suffering from a mental eclipse. Instead of choosing light equipment to survive, the men took silver cutlery sets, heavy curtains, books, and worst of all, giant ship's boats, each weighing tons. They tried to pull those boats on sleds over that rough ice. These men, already sick, hungry, and poisoned, carried their own tombstones with those unnecessary items they took with the logic, maybe we'll need them. The point where humanity ends: cannibalism. Here we come to the darkest, most stomach-churning part of the story. For years, the British denied this, but facts cannot be hidden under the ice. During the march, the men couldn't endure and started dying one by one. Hunger reached such a terrible level that civilized British officers lost their humanity. Towards the end of the road, the survivors began cutting and eating the flesh of their dead friends. Years later, the locals, Inuit in that region, told the British who came to search for them, "We saw men walking on the ice resembling ghosts. They were carrying human flesh in their pots." Famous names in England like Charles Dickens were furious when they heard these accounts. They wrote articles blaming the locals, saying the noble British sailor would never commit cannibalism. This is a fabrication of these savage natives. But 150 years later, as a result of modern forensic examinations done in the 1990s, it was proven that the Inuit were right all along. On the bones found, there were knife marks showing that the flesh had been stripped from the bone, and even marks indicating that broken bones had been cracked to suck the marrow. This was the purest, most savage form of desperation. The searches and ironic discoveries. When Franklin and his men didn't return, the largest search and rescue operation in history began. Dozens of ships were sent. So many ships were sent that some were lost among them. Some got stuck in the ice. In fact, one of those search ships, the HMS Resolute, was abandoned in the ice, and years later, it was found by an American whaling ship. The Americans repaired the ship and gifted it to England. Queen Victoria, as a gesture, had a desk made from the planks of that ship and gifted it to the US President. That famous Resolute desk, used by US presidents in the Oval Office today, is made from parts of the ship that went to search for this tragedy. What a strange fate, isn't it? The final act, return of the ghost ships. For over a century, Franklin's ships remained a legend. No one could locate them, until the development of modern technology and, most importantly, the oral history of the Inuit was valued. Although the locals had been saying for years, "The ship sank over there, we saw its mast," no one had listened. Finally, the Erebus was reached in 2014 and the Terror in 2016, and they were standing almost intact under the water. The cold water had ensured they remained solid. Plates on the shelves, rifles on the wall, even the papers on the captain's desk were standing right where they were. You know what the most chilling detail is? The name of the bay where the Terror was found had been marked on the map years ago as Terror Bay. It didn't take its randomly given name from a ship, but still, the ship seemingly gave its life in the bay bearing its own name. Conclusion: the price of hubris. Franklin's lost expedition taught us this, my friend. No matter how advanced technology you have, no matter how sturdy a ship you have, you cannot defeat nature. Those men set out with the hubris of, "We conquered nature," but nature showed them in the most painful way who was invincible. 129 men, thousands of kilometers away from their homes, knowing they would never see their loved ones again, breathed their last in hunger, madness, and fear. Behind them, they left a mystery fully solved 170 years later, and a sad story buried in the ice. So there you have it. Next time you pick up a tin can or look north on a map, remember those ghosts condemned to walk forever on those ruthless glaciers. Because their story is much more than just an expedition, it is the darkest proof of how far the limits of the human soul can go.